It's 2 a.m. and your phone rings in the quiet of a dark security office while your daughter sleeps miles away, and your body aches from a life of overwork and quiet sacrifice. Now imagine that call isn't for you, but something about the voice on the other end makes you stay on the line anyway. That's exactly what happened to Leon, a single dad and night shift security guard who wasn't expecting his life to change. In the dead of night, but sometimes the universe doesn't knock at dials, and if you're paying attention, you just might answer. Leon's life was built around routines. He woke up every day to make breakfast for his daughter Luna, dropped her off with his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who helped look after her while he worked odd hours and scraped together every penny to keep them afloat ever since his wife passed away years ago. Leon had lived with the quiet ache of loss moving from one day to the next. Like a man holding his breath in his world, there was no room for randomness, only responsibility. And then one night during a slow shift, while watching the security cameras flicker between empty parking lots and dim hallways, his phone lit up with an unknown number. He answered it expecting a wrong number. Maybe a prank instead. A woman's voice came through, broken and afraid, whispering, "Please don't hang up. I need help," she was crying, and Leon's instinct kicked in. He said, "Slow down, who is this?" And the woman hesitated before saying, "I think I called the wrong number. I'm sorry, I thought I was calling someone else," and hung up. Leon sat there for a few seconds staring at the phone. Something about the call wouldn't leave him. He didn't know her name or her story, but the fear in her voice sounded all too familiar. Like the kind he once heard in his own wife's voice during her final days battling cancer. It was raw, real, and urgent. The next night she called again, this time less frantic, but still unsure of who she was speaking to. She apologized again, said she didn't know why she called, but that she didn't have anyone else. Leon didn't try to fix her. He just listened, and slowly over the next few weeks, a strange rhythm developed between them. Every night around 2 a.m., they talked, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Her name was Alice, a nurse who worked long shifts and returned to an apartment. That didn't feel safe, not because of the neighborhood, but because of the man waiting inside. Anthony, her boyfriend, was controlling, emotionally manipulative, and cruel, the kind of person who smiles in public and yells in private. Alice had been trying to leave for months but couldn't find the courage or the resources, or maybe the belief that she deserved better. Leon never pushed her to leave. He never gave her cliches or easy answers. He just stayed on the line night after night, listening, asking gentle questions, telling her about Luna, how his daughter loved bedtime stories with too many voices and pancakes shaped like stars, and Alice started to laugh more. Those laughs were quiet at first, like someone rediscovering how it felt to be safe, then louder, warmer, and eventually filled with hope. And one night she asked him, "Why are you so kind to me?" And Leon paused, then said, "Because someone once showed me kindness when I didn't think I deserved it." And that was true back when his wife passed. A stranger in a grief group named James had pulled him aside and said, "You don't have to go through this alone." Those words carried Leon through the worst nights, and now he was offering that same light to someone else. And this is something we don't talk about enough, how powerful it is to be a witness to someone else's pain, not to solve it, not to fix them, but to say, "I see you and you matter." And in a world that moves fast, where empathy is often replaced by efficiency, those late-night calls were a rebellion against isolation. They were proof that connection doesn't always need to begin perfectly. Sometimes it begins with a misdial. Alice eventually asked to meet. She wanted to see the face of the man who listened to her, without asking for anything in return. And Leon agreed cautiously. They met on a Saturday afternoon at a small park where Luna played with chalk and Alice brought coffee. They sat on a bench, quiet at first, then smiling like old friends catching up. And when Alice met Luna, she melted. She knelt down and said, "Hi, I'm Alice," and Luna hugged her without hesitation, because kids know when someone is good and genuine and kind. And that afternoon stretched into evening and into something that felt a lot like belonging. Alice started visiting more, often bringing muffins from the bakery down the street, coloring books for Luna, small things but meaningful things, and Leon started to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Ease, not excitement, not nervousness, just a steady calm that said this could be something real. And while all of this was blooming quietly, Anthony found out about the calls and the meetings, and the freedom Alice was beginning to find. And he reacted with threats, texts in all caps, accusations, showing up at the clinic where she worked and demanding explanations. Alice was scared, but this time she wasn't alone. Leon stood by her, helped her file a police report, connected her to a women's shelter program through a friend, and most importantly reminded her that she wasn't the problem. She was the survivor. And slowly Alice began to reclaim her life, not in one bold leap, but in 100 small decisions, turning her phone off at night, blocking his number, attending therapy, walking Luna to school with Leon hand in hand, because sometimes healing looks like ordinary days with extraordinary people by your side. Alice began showing up more and more in the fabric of Leon and Luna's lives, not like a sudden storm, but like gentle sunlight slowly warming a cold room. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was simply showing up, helping Luna with her homework, cooking simple dinners, laughing with Leon over board games and late-night tea. And what made it all so beautiful was the way it grew without pressure. Alice still had her job as a nurse, long hours in difficult cases, but every free moment she had, she spent it with them. Luna started calling her Miss Alice at first, then just Alice, and eventually Mommy Alice one evening, without prompting. And that moment broke something open in Leon. Not fear, but gratitude. Not confusion, but peace. Because it felt right, and that's what love often is: not loud fireworks, but quiet recognition of home. Now let's talk about what this story really represents. It's not just about a man and woman falling in love. It's about how people rebuild after loss and trauma, and how emotional safety is the most powerful form of love. Too many narratives glamorize whirlwind romances, but real love often begins in the most human moments, like listening when no one else will, or sharing silence without expectation. Leon and Alice didn't fall in love to save each other. They healed separately, then found their way to one another, and that's a model more people should hear about in real life. Stories like theirs echo everywhere, like that of Ramon, a widowed bus driver in New Mexico, who started mentoring a teenager he met through a community program. Years later, he married the boy's single mother and built a blended family grounded in empathy and shared experiences. Or Sarah, a nurse who left an abusive marriage and found strength in volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, where she met her future husband, a fellow survivor, who now co-leads workshops with her. These stories don't get headlines, but they are the ones that save lives day after day. Slowly and honestly, back in Leon's world, things began to shift further. Alice moved in with them, but not overnight. She started by staying over once in a while, then leaving her things at the apartment, then finally giving notice and walking away from that chapter completely. And the day she handed over her apartment keys, she cried not out of regret, but relief. And that night, Leon held her and said, "I never want you to feel unsafe again. Not in this house, not in this life." And Alice looked up and said, you gave me more than shelter. You gave me permission to be me." Again, they built new routines. Luna was thriving in school and often bragged that she had two parents who made the best waffles. Alice began teaching first aid workshops in local schools and was promoted to head nurse. Leon finally got a new job with better hours, allowing him to be home more often, and every part of their life began to align, not perfectly, but with purpose. There were still hard days, parenting mishaps, moments of doubt, late-night worries about bills in the future, but they faced those together, and that unity became their foundation. And then one spring morning, Alice found herself staring at a pregnancy test in their bathroom, hands trembling, heart racing, and after what felt like an eternity, the result appeared positive. She walked out to the kitchen where Leon and Luna were playing cards and whispered, "Leon, can we talk?" And when he saw the look on her face, he knew this was something big. They sat in the living room and Alice told him, and before she could say more, he smiled, pulled her into his arms and whispered, "Thank you." Alice cried, not because she was scared, but because it felt like life was finally saying yes to her after so many years of no. And Luna was ecstatic. She drew a picture of their growing family and taped it on the fridge under the title, "Our Best Adventure." Yet the months that followed were filled with joy and preparation and reflection. And as Alice's belly grew, so did the love in the home. Leon read bedtime stories to the baby every night, while Luna picked names and argued passionately about whether they were having a boy or girl. And Alice felt more at peace than she ever had before. This pregnancy wasn't just a new life. It was a new chapter one, not written in fear or desperation, but in love and choice, and that is a message worth sharing. Because too often we hear stories of people stuck in cycles of pain. But what about the ones who break free, who do the hard work of healing, and then go on to build something beautiful? Alice didn't escape Anthony's grip by luck. She did it through small, brave choices, through community support, and through a man who chose to listen instead of control. And that's what Leon gave her, not a rescue, but a relationship built on respect and mutual care. And one of the most powerful parts of this story is how it reminds us that families are not born. They are built with patience, empathy, and presence, not just for the good times, but for the hard ones too. And it was during one of those hard moments late in the pregnancy, when Alice was put on bed rest, that Leon really stepped up, managing the homemaking meals, helping Luna with school, and making sure Alice felt supported and cared for. And she would often look at him and say, "I still can't believe you came into my life because of a wrong number." And Liam would laugh and reply, "Maybe it wasn't so wrong after all." As the due date approached, the entire home buzzed with anticipation and gentle preparation. Baby clothes were washed, tiny socks folded, and lullabies played through the house, like a soft echo of the joy that was coming. Leon repainted the nursery, with Luna choosing the colors. She insisted on yellow because she said it feels like happiness. And Alice spent long afternoons on the couch, reading baby books, with one hand on her belly and the other holding Leon's. This wasn't just about preparing for a baby. It was about nurturing a new beginning for everyone involved. And that kind of beginning matters more than people realize when a family is built from pain and redemption. Every little ritual becomes sacred. The baby shower was small, just close friends and neighbors. Mrs. Patterson, who had helped raise Luna, baked her famous apple pie and gave Alice a handmade quilt with the words, "You are home now," sewn into the corner. And when Alice read the message, she held it close like a promise she would carry forever. Then one quiet night, as rain tapped gently on the roof, Alice whispered to Leon, "It's time," and without panic, but with quiet urgency, they gathered their things, woke Luna, and headed to the hospital. The labor was long, filled with moments of exhaustion and beauty, and when the baby finally arrived, a girl they named Joy, everything stopped. Joy entered the world in a room overflowing with love, and the moment Alice held her, she knew every heartbreak had led to this. Every sleepless night, every tear, every wrong turn had brought her to the arms of this child. And when Leon held her, his eyes filled with quiet wonder, he whispered to her, "You saved us too. You reminded us of who we are and what we deserve." And back home, as Joy settled into her new world, the home evolved once again into something even more intimate and connected, and the rhythms of life began to shift: early morning feedings, shared yawns, sleepy smiles, and days filled with lullabies and Luna's giggles, and Alice's tired but content sighs. Leon began working from home part-time, managing logistics for a local security firm, which allowed him to be there for every milestone. And he would often find himself just watching Alice with Joy, his eyes filled with admiration and respect, not just for who she was as a mother, but who she had become as a woman. And one day he asked her, "Do you think you would have believed 5 years ago that your life would look like this?" And Alice smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not in a million years." And that's the power of rewriting your story, of standing in the ashes of what you thought your life would be and saying, "I will still build something beautiful here." And that's exactly what they did. And their story didn't go unnoticed either. A local magazine ran a story about them, titled "From a Wrong Number to the Right Life," and it resonated deeply with readers. People reached out with letters, emails, and calls, sharing their own stories of late-night pain and unexpected healing, and Alice began writing a blog where she shared bits of her journey with honesty and vulnerability. She didn't try to be perfect. She just tried to be real, and in that honesty, others found hope. One woman named Brianna wrote, "I was in the middle of my own abusive relationship when I read your post, and I finally decided to leave you. Gave me a picture of what freedom can look like." And Leon, too, found his voice. He began speaking at local schools and fatherhood workshops, telling young men about emotional presence and how strength isn't in silence, but in showing up. He told them it's okay to hurt, it's okay to need help, and most importantly, it's okay to start over. And those talks mattered more than any paycheck. more than any recognition, because they planted seeds in the minds of people who needed it. And Luna blossomed too, growing into a strong, empathetic young girl who started her own kindness club at school, encouraging students to include those who felt left out. And when asked why, she said, "Because everyone deserves to be seen and loved, just like my family taught me." And the home that once echoed only with the sound of Leon's quiet grief now rang with music and bedtime stories, and the endless sound of a life well lived. And as Joy grew and took her first steps under the watchful eyes of her sister and parents, Alice began to reflect not just on how far they had come, but on the small details that had carried them here. The way Leon never rushed her, the way Luna welcomed her without judgment, the way she herself kept choosing to believe that a better life was possible. And all of those small, brave acts created a tapestry of love, stitched together by time, trust, and tender care. And now, if you find yourself wondering if it's too late for your own story to change, let this be the answer. It's not, because one wrong call at 2 a.m. might just be the beginning of everything you were meant to find. Life in their home had taken on a rhythm that felt like a song, quietly composed between late-night feedings and early morning snuggles, each member of the family contributing their own melody. Luna's laughter, the cooing of baby Joy, Alice's soft humming as she rocked her daughter, and Leon's warm, steady voice telling bedtime stories each night. And though it wasn't perfect, it was profoundly real, and in that realness, they found joy deeper than they had ever known. Alice began journaling again, not for an audience but for herself, capturing the moments she never wanted to forget. Joy's first laugh, Luna's first poem, the way Leon always kissed her forehead before leaving the room. Small things that added up to everything, and Leon found himself watching them sometimes quietly from the kitchen door or across the living room, holding a warm mug and wondering how his life had gone from lonely to luminous. In such a short time, he knew it hadn't been magic. It had been choice, consistent choices to stay to, listen to, forgive, to love. And what they built was a reflection of those daily commitments. One evening, as they prepared dinner, Luna asked a question that caught them all off guard. "How come we don't talk about Mommy more?" She meant Leon's late wife, the woman who gave birth to her and who Leon loved deeply before her passing. Leon paused, set down the bowl. He was holding and pulled Luna into his lap. He told her, "Your mommy was amazing. She loved you so much, and she'd be so proud of the person you're becoming." And Alice reached over, taking Luna's hand, and added, "And because she loved you, your daddy learned how to love again. And I got to love you too." And that moment wasn't heavy, it was healing. It gave Luna permission to hold both truths, to grieve and celebrate, to honor the past without getting lost in it. And later that night, as Leon tucked Luna into bed, she whispered, "I think Joy will want to know about her too." And Leon nodded. "We'll tell her everything, because every part of our story matters." And that's a lesson so many of us can carry forward. The idea that we don't have to erase our past to embrace our future, that love doesn't have to be linear to be real, and that healing can include remembrance without regret. In the wider community, Leon and Alice continued to lead quietly but powerfully. Leon started mentoring young dads who were struggling to balance work and parenting. He met with them, weekly, offering advice, but more importantly, space to be vulnerable. One of the young men, a 22-year-old named Marcus, wrote him a letter saying, "Before I met you, I thought being a man meant being hard. Now I know it means being present." And Alice's blog turned into a local podcast where she interviewed other survivors of abuse, focusing not on the trauma, but on the strength it took to heal. Her episodes were filled with laughter, tears, and deep wisdom. And one review captured it best. "She doesn't tell you how to fix your life. She reminds you it's worth fixing." And that kind of message rippled far beyond their city into other homes, other hearts, giving people permission to hope. Again, back at home, baby Joy was crawling, then walking, then running. Luna started middle school and asked to join the debate team. And one night during dinner, she stood up with a shy smile and asked, "Can we all have the same last name someday?" And Leon and Alice looked at each other and knew the time was right. They had talked about marriage but never rushed it for them. The commitment had already been made in 1,000 everyday moments. But now it was time to make it official, and they decided on something unique. Instead of a big ceremony, they invited only close family and neighbors to their backyard, transformed with fairy lights, handwritten vows, and homemade desserts. And when Alice walked down the path, barefoot, holding Joy, and smiling at Luna, who was tossing flower petals, the whole gathering felt like a page from a storybook, one written by hand, with love and intention. And during the ceremony, Leon said, "You were never a stranger to me. Even that first night I heard your voice, I think my soul already knew you." And Alice replied, "And I didn't call the wrong number that night. I just hadn't found the right person yet." And as they kissed, Luna cheered baby Joy, clapped, and the entire neighborhood rose to their feet, clapping through tears, because this wasn't just a wedding. It was a testimony to what can happen when people choose each other again and again and again. And in that moment, every hardship they had endured felt like it had led to this, not erasing the pain, but transforming it into something meaningful, something beautiful, something whole. In the weeks following their wedding, life didn't suddenly become easier, but it felt deeper, more grounded, and even more intentional. Leon and Alice weren't chasing happiness anymore. They were living it slowly, deliberately, and with so much gratitude. They still had their early morning chaos of missing shoes and forgotten lunchboxes. They still had days where one of them came home too tired to speak, but now those moments didn't feel like interruptions. They felt like life unfolding honestly. And in those ordinary days, they found the kind of joy that can't be faked, the kind built by hand, not handed down. And it was during one such ordinary afternoon that Alice sat on the porch watching Joy play in the grass. And Luna read under the tree, and she began drafting her first book. She had thought about it for months, not a memoir exactly, but a collection of reflections. Letters and lessons drawn from the journey they had taken. She called it Stronger Than Silence, and every page echoed the central truth, that your voice is your power even when it trembles, even when it takes time to rise. Alice didn't want fame, she wanted impact. She wanted the next woman who felt trapped, voiceless or small, to pick up those pages and see her own strength reflected back at her. And Leon supported her at every step, editing drafts, watching the kids during late-night writing sessions, encouraging her when the words wouldn't come. He never tried to take over or offer fixes. He simply stood beside her the way true partners do. And in turn, Alice supported him when he got invited to speak at a national fatherhood summit. He nearly declined, doubting whether his story mattered enough. But Alice reminded him that the most powerful stories are the ones that speak softly. Leon went and told a room full of fathers that showing up isn't about perfection, it's about presence. And that message hit home more than any policy, more than any workshop, because it came from truth, a truth that had been earned day by day through heartbreak, healing, and hope. And in that season, they also learned to celebrate small wins, like Luna's first public speech at school, where she talked about family being the people who choose you again and again. Or when Joy learned to say, "I love you," and ran around the house declaring it to every pillow and plant. Or when Alice received an email from a reader who wrote, "I left last night because your words reminded me that staying was never going to fix him." Each of these moments reminded them why their story mattered, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real and relatable and needed. And they began working together on a local initiative called The Second Call, a community project designed to connect people in crisis to support networks, not just through therapy, but through companionship, real-time human connections. Because sometimes all it takes is one person saying, "I hear you," to start a chain reaction of change. And The Second Call grew faster than they expected. Volunteers signing up, counselors donating hours, local businesses offering funding, and all of it began with one wrong call at 2 a.m. Leon often reflected on that moment, how easy it would have been to hang up, how ordinary it had felt at the time, and how profoundly it had changed everything. And that's a message we all need to remember, that ordinary moments carry extraordinary potential if we have the courage to stay present and respond with kindness. And that's what he and Alice taught their children too. Not to chase success, but to pursue connection, not to fear brokenness, but to honor the beauty of rebuilding. And their home became a space for others too. Friends in crisis, neighbors who needed help, students who needed guidance. It wasn't always convenient, but it was always worth it, because in giving they found more than they ever imagined. In receiving, they found the courage to give back. And when Joy turned 5, they hosted a backyard party filled with music and laughter and water balloons. And as they stood there watching their children run across the grass, Alice turned to Leon and said, "This feels like a dream," and he smiled no. It feels like what happens when two people don't give up, and in that moment they knew that while their story began with a mistake, it became a masterpiece, not because they had planned it, but because they had embraced it fully. And now they were living proof that healing is possible, that families can be made not just through blood, but through choice, and that one act of kindness can ripple farther than we ever imagined. So if you ever feel stuck in a chapter that hurts, just remember this story and know that your next call, your next decision, your next breath might be the one that changes everything.